Where's my cat? I want my cat to be here.
Come up here, honey.
You want to be in the video? You're so fun in the videos. There's always this thing that's talked about in the autism world, the adult autism world, and that is the frustration with how little resources there are surrounding autism, how it's always made for kind of one age group, and that being children. There is so much stuff around autism, but what do the autistic children grow into as autistic adults? And then it's like, oh, well, you're an adult, you can figure it out. I predominantly try and focus a lot of my videos, a lot of my content to people who have been diagnosed later in life, because there is such a confusion that kind of comes with that. But I think this is probably like the first video in a long time that I am going to be talking about childhood, and whether you were diagnosed or undiagnosed, it really doesn't matter here. I'm sure this can apply to you. But that is like the prevalence of gaslighting yourself. And I think that it starts early as children. Like, as I say, whether you were diagnosed or undiagnosed, it doesn't really matter. If you're autistic, you were an autistic child at some point regardless, right? So I'm sure that this will be something that a lot of us can relate to. And this starts all those years ago. I am writing a book currently. It is no secret. I am talking about the journey to diagnosis and the struggles that have come before and after that. And I spent last week kind of writing about my early years. And it's an uncomfortable place for me to kind of be in. One, because a lot of it I don't have memories of, so I can't recount what happened in a way that I can with other memories that have happened in my life as an adult or as a teenager or as a child, you know. So I'm relying on someone else's views of myself. But at the same time, there's nothing that I can do, and there's nothing that you can do to go back and change that. I just find that I get stuck there if I focus too much. You can get angry. You can feel a lot of grief when you focus a lot on what was and what wasn't in your childhood. And so I struggled, all of that to say I was struggling to write this chapter, but it is such an important chapter, and it's probably going to be the first chapter, who knows? So it carried a lot of weight, and when things carry a lot of weight, I procrastinate because I want to do it right, and I want to do you guys right as the readers. And all of that to say, this is what I wrote in my chapter. It's the topic of today's video. How early gaslighting starts depending on what type of child you were. So let's jump into it. What type of child were you? The compliant child or the non-conformist child? I think children can kind of fall into one, if not both of these, depending on the environment, the age you were, the people that you were around. So, for example, I think typically I was the non-conformist child. A lot of people in my life would be like, there's no way, you were so kind and nice and sweet and whatever. As I said, depends on the environment. When I was at home, before I was diagnosed, I caused a lot of havoc. The first thought that came to my brain just then as I was talking was I was going to say I was the devil child. And that's how I've always termed myself. That's how I was made to feel. So what is this? Basically, the conformist child essentially learnt that there was safety to be found in complying to what others around you wanted. It meant denying their own needs in order to survive. Maybe they were raised in a home where children were expected to be seen and not heard, and so the child essentially learnt, the better behavior I have, the more rewarding and validating that is, especially when it comes from an adult. You don't want to add to the stress of anyone else, even if you are crippling and dying inside. I think that there is a narrative with this compliant child, and that is, if I upset anyone, then I must be in the wrong. And so this can lead to a lot of identity issues, not being able to recognize your own needs, your own desires, because you've suppressed them in order to please somebody else and keep the peace and keep the harmony. On the other hand, we have the non-conformist child, which is essentially, basically being denied their needs as well. While they might speak up more honestly about their needs, they are still shut down, they are still dismissed or denied or misunderstood even. It doesn't always have to be a negative. Maybe the parent or the caregiver doesn't really know what to do, so because they don't know, they mistake or misunderstand. If you are an autistic child, which if you are autistic, then you were an autistic child, then there was probably this need, this inherent need to know the detail. So the who, what, when, where, how, why. And so with that, you may have experienced needing to know detail can be seen as, challenging authority. Simply being told because I said so just is not enough for that child. And so they can be labeled as defiant, challenging, stubborn. Not only this, but if you have been undiagnosed as a child, then the natural byproduct of being undiagnosed, the behaviors that come along with it can be seen as acting out. So meltdowns, shutdowns, yelling and screaming, trying to self-soothe your nervous system can be misinterpreted by the parents as they are not acting like the other children, they are poorly behaved, and so you get labeled as the devil child. I think what happens over time is the household gets into the cycle of reprimanding the vocal child. And so over time, once you've tried to express yourself honestly and authentically, and that consistently gets misunderstood or pushed to the side or whatever, you do just go, okay, well, whatever I do, it's going to be misinterpreted, so I may as well be rebelliant. I may as well rebel. I also want to say that with what I'm talking about here, the compliant child and the non-conformist child, it is not exclusive just to autism by any means, but this is the context that I am coming from and how it can lead to the internalized self-gaslighting. So definitely, as I was saying earlier, I definitely fell into the non-conformist child when I was at home. That was my safe space, but because of that, I learned that I needed to be extremely vocal in order to have my needs met, even if they were going to be met. Most of the time, if I was being that vocal or I was being that loud and my behavior was very externalized, it often meant it was perceived like I was acting out or whatever, and so I was reprimanded because no one just understood, not even myself. But then when I was at school, I feared authority. I feared drawing any attention to myself. I feared standing out, and it was very, very unsafe for me to be non-conforming in that kind of environment. And so I just complied. I complied with what every teacher asked of me. I did everything correctly. And so basically all of this to say you can be both in different environments, or you can just be one across all environments. So how does this apply, the differences in the way that a child behaves, an undiagnosed or diagnosed child behaves? What does this have to do with internalized self-gaslighting? Well, I'll tell you. But first, let me see if you relate to any of these comments. And these comments you might have said to yourself either as a child, or you might still be saying them to yourself as an adult. It's probably my fault they're upset. Maybe I don't actually know what I'm feeling. If I can't explain why it's hard, then it must not be. I'm always the one to ruin things. I guess I am just the bad kid. If I was really struggling, then someone would have helped me. So maybe I'm not. I can't trust myself to say the right thing. If I'm not masking, I'll lose everyone. I shouldn't feel like this. So if you say or have said any of these things to yourself, that is called internalized self-gaslighting. Basically what it is it's you dismissing your own thoughts, your own feelings, and this usually happens because over time those parts of you have been misunderstood and pushed aside. And this can begin as early as, a newborn baby, a toddler, but I think the older the child gets, the more misunderstood, the more angry parents, caregivers can actually get with children that might have higher needs. When human beings come into this world, we are extremely impressionable, and we are looking to those that we're around to try and understand and make sense of this new environment that we're put in. And the thing that happens that I don't know if a lot of parents really realize is emotional regulation. They get angry because the child is acting out, or they're having a meltdown, or they're crying, or they're just unable to be soothed. And that's the thing. What they're wanting is emotional regulation, and that is being able to self-soothe and find a healthy state, find a healthy norm. It's not like this roller coaster of emotions. It's like we can deal with the lows and we can deal with the highs. But that is actually a skill that is taught, and you have to learn how to do that. And the parents oftentimes are wanting the child, the crying, acting out child, to know how to do that, to self-soothe, to stop crying, to stop having a panic attack or whatever, and just get on with it. They're unable to do that. And most of the time, this comes because the parent also hasn't learned how to do that. So what happens? You're either met with dismissal or discipline. And this is what creates the self-gaslighting. Because we are looking to adults to tell us, to soothe us, to teach us, and they aren't doing those things, naturally our brain tries to protect itself by saying, okay, the reason they're not doing those things is because of something that I'm doing. It's something with my behavior. I need to control this a little better. I think the one thing that I heard as a child, which, I talk about these things, I talk about my own experiences, not because I carry any of the hatred or any blame toward my parents anymore. I have done a lot of therapy and I forgive them, and they are doing the best they can now, and they were doing it then, and we've had a lot of conversations, and I'm very lucky for that. But the fact of the matter is, I still heard this, and so I will share it. I remember always feeling like and hearing like everyone else is fine. Like, why are you making a scene right now? And so those words do create a lasting impression. Like, they do tell your self-esteem, like, oh, I'm not up to what other people are doing. I don't know how to act like them. So this is a flaw of mine. As you grow into an adult and setting boundaries and understanding your identity and being able to speak up for yourself, having relationships, having friendships, those become increasingly hard when you have been dismissed or you have been disciplined. I think over time what happens, like in childhood, is the child starts to lose their sense of self, their sense of autonomy, their sense of identity. They don't trust and therefore don't really know their own needs and their own instincts. Because whether you were the compliant child or the non-conformist child, you may have been taught that your reality is wrong, that your experiences, your sensory overload, your emotions were wrong. How does self-gaslighting, internalized self-gaslighting, affect the individual? This might look like dismissing or dissociating emotional, physical pain because you've just learned, like, I can't tend to myself. I shouldn't be tending to myself because no one else did. When there were things going wrong when I was a child, no one else did, so I shouldn't be doing it now. It can look like blaming yourself for things that weren't actually your fault, feeling ashamed to ask for help, low self-esteem, doubting your own instincts, doubting your own mind, your body, your intuition. It's just basically a disconnect from your mind to your body. I also want to acknowledge in all of this, because I know that this is probably quite a heavy conversation, probably quite a heavy thing to think about, and I don't want to kind of leave you in this, but I just want to say that no matter the home, no matter the family, no matter the parents, whatever the dynamic is, no one at all, no one on this planet is exempt from pain and hardship and trauma. And every parent somewhere along the road is going to fuck it up and still traumatize their child, no matter how good they want to do it or how bad they want to do it. There will still be trauma for everybody. I know that unpacking childhood trauma can be so deeply intense and confusing and really quite daunting, particularly if you don't have a relationship with your parents or caregivers to then have a healthy conversation. You know, in an ideal world, we would be able to sit down and talk these things through with these people, and they would be able to say, like, I'm sorry. But most of the time that doesn't happen, and we have to do that for ourselves. And I am by no means a psychologist, a child psychologist at all. I am just somebody who has done these things, is doing these things, working through her trauma, along with you guys. The point that I want to leave you guys with that has helped soothe me, and I just want to say this may or may not soothe you depending on where you're at in terms of the acceptance around your childhood. But I've done a lot of work around this. I've been in therapy since I was 6. But the quote that has helped me is that everyone is doing life for the very first time, and that goes with your parents, your caregivers. They didn't know how to be parents before they became parents. This is their first shot at life too. And I think for the most part, most parents don't want to fuck their child up. Most of them, not always, but most of the time, they're doing what they think is best, and they probably got it wrong. I would say a lot of parents got it wrong, but I found a lot of peace in that. I didn't see my parents as my parents. I saw them as individuals, and I had a lot of empathy and grace for them. Again, I am in more of the acceptance stage of my childhood for the things that did and didn't happen to me. And so this might soothe you or it might not. Overall, this was meant to be a video to help give you guys a little bit more understanding of who you are and your identity. I try and have conversations to bring up new thoughts that you may not have had up until now. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you would like to chat to me, see more of my content, all my links are always down below. Flick me a message. I love to chat to you guys. Yeah, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye. Stay kind. Stay kind to yourself, especially.